What is the non-dual psychedelic state? This is something that was first introduced to me a few years ago by Martin Ball, Martin W. Ball. He wrote a bunch of different books. He wrote a lot of books on 5-MeO DMT and using 5-MeO to induce a non-dual psychedelic state. And he wrote a lot about it, and it was pretty fascinating. It really opened my eyes to a lot of kind of delusions I had about the psychedelic state. And since then, I've been able to go into my psychedelic experiences with a much more pan-back level of awareness and understanding of what it is that I'm experiencing. I just wanted to kind of rant a little bit about it. So to me, one of the concepts about the non-dual state is the idea that there's things happening, but just because there's something happening doesn't mean there's someone it's happening to. So there could be seeing without a seer, meaning I could be seeing things and things are being seen, things are being experienced, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a seer that's within the experience that's seeing it. It's kind of like a optical delusion where there's a body, and just because the body, it seems like there's watching from the body, it doesn't mean that the body's actually watching. I think that it's similar to a dream. So when we have a dream, there's the whole world that is being made up. You could say it's being made up in the dream. And in the dream, there's a dream body. So, my body will be, in the dream, it'll be generated. And don't hold me to all the details of how I'm saying me, my body, I'm seeing. It doesn't matter. I'm just trying to convey the message, and it doesn't actually matter. So in a dream, a body is being generated, but if I look closely, I see, well, there's the dream world. Say I'm like in a city or something, and then there's the body that's in the city, but that body isn't, you could say it's not really my body because my body is asleep dreaming this up. So the mind, the imagination is generating a body within the dream itself. And so it doesn't mean that that body is the thing that's seeing. It can look that way. It could seem like the perspective or vantage point is from the body, but that body is actually just part of the dream itself. So that body is within the dream. It's part of the content of the dream. That body isn't the thing that's actually seeing. What's actually seeing isn't something that can be seen. What's actually seeing is not a thing at all. There's just seeing. There's just visual. It doesn't mean that there's a seer. So in a sense, the thing that is seeing isn't a thing. There's just awareness of what's being, in a sense, seeing. There's awareness of the visual aspect of the experience. So I mean, this sort of thing, I think if it hasn't stuck for someone yet, I think just a lot of repetition and different analogies and just kind of repeating the same things over and over in different ways eventually leads to being able to like, oh, okay, I see. So how something like this relates to the psychedelic state is generally when someone takes a psychedelic, let's say DMT, for example, because it's kind of an extreme example. When I smoke DMT, all sorts of fantastical imagery starts to flood in. It seems like my body's getting impaled by all this light visual geometry. I'm like dissolving, I'm becoming it. And in the experience itself, there's like this dissolving that happens, but there's a lot of visual and a lot of stuff to kind of get entranced by. And generally, when someone were to come out of that experience, like for me, when I would come out of the experience, I would retell the story as if it happened to me, as if, so I was there, I smoked DMT, and then all these visual things started happening. I was seeing them, and then they started going into my body, or I started getting confused with who I was. There's like this, in the experience itself, there's this kind of dissolving of that, but then in the retelling, the ego talks about it as if it happened to it, but really there is no person that it happened to. There is no self that it happened to. And that's where the experience can show, but with DMT it's very confusing because there's just so much going on. Whereas say something like 5-MeO DMT, where all that just kind of gets forced to dissolve. Like, it's not about this visual, all these visual crazy things going on, but it's about this merging, and everything kind of merges into a single thing, like a single immensity of some kind. And it's realized that, oh, there's no distinction between me and what I'm seeing. That was just a game that's happening within the content. This happens to me a lot with ketamine. And it happens to me with like most of these psychedelics. Sometimes they can get a little confused in the experience. So a lot of times, especially with ketamine, and I swear, especially when I mix ketamine with a little bit of 5-MeO, it just really pans it back to like, it's like a feedback loop of this panning back, breaking the fourth wall. So the third wall, I think it's the fourth wall, but like it breaks the fourth wall, then it breaks another fourth wall, and I keep panning back because I'm realizing, oh, I think I'm seeing, but I'm not. There's just what is, and then it's all dissolving into itself. So like on ketamine, there'll be like the imagination starts to come to the foreground, and there's like a very visual and tactile, like sensational thing going on. And then I noticed like, oh, the narrative that I generally will, like the commentator that will happen during any sort of experience, I'll comment, but then I'll see like, oh, that comment is actually not coming from the commenter. There's no commenter. There's just a comment. So there's like, say, this visual stuff going on. There's like this morphing and gliding and all these like really strange things happening. And then there'll be a comment like, whoa, this is weird. Or, oh, I can't believe this is happening. And then it's like, but that becomes part of the thing. And it doesn't become it as if it wasn't it before. It was it the whole time. And so anytime these things arise, comments or this sense of self, it's really a false sense of self, because in all of reality, there's only one thing, and there's just awareness. Basically, there's consciousness, and then the content. The content itself isn't actually real. It's like a play of light. It's a play of concepts and sensations and physics. But all those things, they're just, to me, it's like this is all made out of the imagination. And so the imagination is what's making up these different concepts or these different subject-object sort of experiences. When that gets squeezed together or that just dissolves, it's seen that, oh, all that was just an illusion. There's no separation between things. There's no separation between self and other. There's no distinction between past and future. There's just like a single nowness it appears to be changing. And for me, it seems like that's just what the imagination is. It's like when we take certain psychedelics, the imagination itself comes to the foreground, and the imagination becomes experienced and immersed into. And I realize that my concept of self, the idea that there's a self, that there's a me, that I have a story about me, that I'm the one that's seeing what's happening or it's happening to me. That's just another play of the whole imagination. The imagination is making that all up too. So there's just consciousness and then the content. And the content appears to have distinction or appears to have separation or appears to have a me and a them or a me and other. But that's just an appearance of the whole thing. The whole immensity, it's all just one thing. And then it sort of plays these games with itself. I think just for entertainment, I think that's just what the universe has always been. The universe itself has always just been the imagination just playing. And the imagination has a way of slowing down thoughts. This happens to me on ketamine, where I'll be gliding through these imagined realms, and like the realms can have different tactile densities, different textures, or different sizes. There could be like, I could feel like I'm in something very small, or I could feel very expanded, like the size of the universe. And then there'll be this gliding and moving, and all of a sudden it'll just pause. And it's like, generally when we imagine, the imagination's almost like, it has this kind of fluid, constantly changing aspect. But sometimes in the experience, there'll be this gliding, and all of a sudden it'll just stop. And then there's like this kind of solidity. And a lot of times there's like sort of these kind of right angles to things. It's like almost like I'm looking at a wall where it meets something. And I know I'm not looking at the wall in my room because first it's pitch black and my eyes are also covered. But there's like this way that the imagination slows down and then solidifies. And there's this solidity, and it'll pause for a little bit. And I'm like, that's real. That must be real because it looks so solid, the way that I would look at a wall and be like, yeah, that's not moving at all. That's totally solid. So that must be real. But it's just an illusion too. I think that we don't even know what the imagination of the universe is or what it's capable of, but I think it is capable of slowing things down in a sense, or making things seem solid for periods of time, but then ultimately that could just dissolve at any moment. It's like the universe, it has this capability of making things solid in a way. It's like, in the same way that when we have a dream, in the dream you're like, oh yeah, I was downtown at a park and all these things were happening to me. The park itself and the fact that you're in this environment, it solidifies momentarily, but it doesn't make it real. But in the experience, it seems real. And in the experience, it seems so solid and real that we're just convinced that these things are happening, but really it's just a dream. So how did the imagination solidify things? And you could say like, oh, well, if you're in a dream, if you really look closely, it's constantly changing, but that could still be said about reality itself. So these are things that I could talk about this all day, but I don't have a lot of time right now. But these are some of the things that comes up. And I think I took a tangent away from non-duality, but there's so many tangents that this can go down. But ultimately, it has to do with the imagination. To me, what I think is that consciousness itself, the entire universe itself, is the imagination. It's always been the imagination. That's what the universe is made out of. It's made out of imagining, and it's always imagining. And it's imagining by you right now. So you're watching this, and awareness has teleported to your body at this moment and is imagining this. And it's somehow, I don't know. I don't fucking know how it works, but you're imagining, like, when you think of like, yeah, how big is the universe? You have this concept. You have this idea of how big it is. Maybe it's something you read somewhere, or heard from like a science magazine or whatever. But ultimately, you're imagining in that moment how big you think the universe is, and that creates like this kind of construct that you're in. Like, what is this made out of? Some people think they're made out of atoms. Some people think they're made out of strings. Some people think it's just made out of love. Like, in anybody's particular experience, they're going to have these ideas of what it's made out of. And in a way, that's how the imagination makes worlds, is that it kind of can solidify things for the current dream that's happening. Like, for example, right now you're listening or watching this, and you're currently having a dream. and in this dream you're watching this, and in this dream the reality that you're in has solidified to a certain point, to where it's convincing and you can like maneuver through it. But I think that at any point that could dissolve, especially when one takes certain substances. The mind can just let go, or it just remembers that it stops being so entranced by the experience itself, by the dream state, by the subject-object structure that seems to like kind of take hold. And then when we take some substances, or when we die or have some sort of just like intense experience, it could break the trance, and then the imagination roams free, at least temporarily, and remembers what it is. Like, oh, like, yeah, it's just the dream state of some kind. And psychedelics, I think, yeah, most of them, they do it in different ways and at different intensities, or with different different states or textures, or some allow us to focus more on certain things and certain aspects of of reality, and some just completely dissolve it, or some let us completely dissolve and merge with the immensity itself. And I think having an understanding of non-duality, that there's no such thing as a self, that there's just this appearance of a self, of this separate entity that's experiencing reality, when really reality is just being experienced. It could be experienced without an experiencer. Having that in mind allows me to, while I'm in the psychedelic experience, to see things a bit more clearly and go like, oh yeah, because sometimes in the state itself, I could be kind of confused and think I'm someone that's experiencing this, but I pan back. And then as I pan back, I just start to realize more and more. And the experience just starts to really like go up like orders of magnitude more. It like pans back in a way, or I see things, or it allows all sorts of things that were impossible before, because I was kind of holding the dream, or holding the limitations of the dream a certain way. But when that can break free, then I get to really immerse and get lost in the imagination itself. And when I say lost, I mean like, what I really mean is that I can just let it happen, and I can just flow with the experience more. And then when I come out of the experience, my interpretation of it won't be so misconstrued with like subject object, like, yeah, this happened to me, and then this happened, and then I dissolved, and then like I communicate with these beings or whatever. I'll do a whole other video about entities and beings, but I lost my train of thought there. I think so when coming back out of it, you can have a more clear interpretation of the experience, and I think get more out of it, and not get so fixated on like the story of it, or like, oh, this happened to me, or this is like it. I think it could just bring too much stuff that doesn't actually matter into the experience, and it could seem like it matters. And then also just the experiences themselves can just become way more profound and way trippier, way cooler, way more, like it allows awe to really flood in. Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool. I'll probably talk about this a whole bunch, like as I make more videos and stuff like that. But it's definitely an idea that not a lot of people talk about. But if you want, I'll probably put a link to Martin Ball's stuff. He writes about it pretty clearly. I really like that. But yeah, it's good stuff. Anyway, I gotta go. If you want more info, there's probably some links in the description to like my website, to my podcast, to the sensory deprivation portals that I build, and yeah, I'll probably have like a Patreon and GoFundMe and things like that, because I kind of need it right now. So yeah, if you like this video, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Appreciate it. All right, see ya.